Hey, this is Ken at Canvas Brakes, and we're going to take a look at Kobe Shields Camaro. It's now coming out of the closet to go to Dave's ALS race that will be at VIR this Friday. So in order to get Kobe ready, we're going to take a look at the brakes, we're going to do an oil change, just kind of go over the car, get it ready for the track day. So we'll put these on and have a look. Now, he's been on this track in this car for quite a bit, good lap times, etc. He'll be running a street tire this weekend, and he generally runs a pretty aggressive track pad, usually a Hawk DTC 70s or 60s. I think in this case he might have 60s in the car. They have a couple sessions on them at most, but you'll also notice he's replaced the OEM discs. These are the Giradisc ones, and I think whoever helped him with it, as you can see, the slots are going in this direction, but we're pretty sure that the disc is rotating in the correct direction. So we want to fix that at the same time. So while we're doing that, we'll go over taking the whole thing apart real quick, having a look at all the parts, making sure they're ready. This would be considered a routine part of a track day preparation. So my favorite gloves are on, and we can see the first thing is, wow, that's weird. So he has the replacement rotor rings. And if you look closely, you can see that these are curved vane rotor. The vanes are curved forward, you know, and the rotor rotates in that direction when you're rolling, of course. That's actually incorrect. The rotor doesn't scoop the air like that. It should be going the other way, where the vanes are curved backwards. And so with the spinning direction, it's like a pump to pump air from the inside to the outside. That's to aid cooling of the disc and improve the brake performance. The other thing I just noticed right away is, obviously in the course of doing the install, you may notice these little torque screws that assumedly hold the rotor down. They're really only for one reason, and that's just to have the rotor not be loose when you're installing the caliper after the replacement, etc. In the case of GM, they'll put that on there when the car's new, that holds the rotor in place so the guy that's doing the caliper can do it more quickly. It's a torque screw. The problem is if you tighten that up in there and then drive through water and whatnot, it's going to seize, and then you end up having to do something like this. So this was on another car. I just had to drill that out and get it out. But at the end of the day, none of these are needed. They go in the trash. So the first thing is, let's get the brake pads out. You've been down this road before, I'm sure. It's not difficult. I've done a lot of these Brembos. You'll generally need a punch to get the pins out. A 13 millimeter to get the cross bolt out. Then the spring will come off and the pads can be removed. At that point, then we can remove the caliper, hang that out of the way, swap the rotors, put everything back together, and off you go. Now before we start, we'll notice a couple of things about the SS1LE brakes. It's a typical 6-piston Brembo brake pad shape and Brembo 2-piece disc. Like I said, we got the Giradisc replacement rings on the outside here. But if you can get the camera over here in a second, I want to show one thing that is a little bit weird. This is one of the few, and it's right here to my left here, if you look in there at the brake line here where it comes into the caliper. It's a little bit of a weird connection, but they've got the port on the bottom of the caliper. Usually that port comes in straight into the backside. So that does make this a bit of a unique brake line. It's nothing to worry about, it's just something to note. It does make access to that bolt a little weird. You have to have an extension, but you know, it's no big deal. We're going to get that out, no problem. So we just have a punch, put on the end of the pin. You know, this is a track car, I'm not too worried, but you know, some of you want it to be really clean, so be careful. Tap it through. Once it gets out, you see it comes apart pretty easy. There's a pin. There's your clip, and remember they do, I think, have an arrow on them. Either way, they're kind of a one-way fit, but not symmetrical. So you go, let's get the other pin. Again, that's a 13 millimeter on the cross bolt. torque spec on this bolt going back in is about 15 to 18 foot-pounds. Maybe off a couple there, it's not super critical. I don't mind putting a little blue Loctite if you want there, but we're in these brakes all the time, so doesn't matter much. Out of pad, get the pistons back a little bit, make some room. Can't see what's left on there. Don't know if they're 70s or 60s, but they're wearing nice and flat. Plenty of meat left. If this was tapered front to back, we consider flipping them around to equalize the wear. It's not a bad idea. There's nothing worse than taking out your brake pads and you got 3 or 4 millimeters of material left on one and it's down in the metal on the end because you feel like you left some money on the table. And, you know, who wants to do that? Everything looks normal. We almost see no glazing or anything. That a little bit of crumbling on the surface, a little bit of shiny, but all in all, it looks like the pad is suited to its usage, which is always a trick. Caliper bolts are the only real problem. So this setup looks effective to get the 19s or 18s off here. But this setup looks more effective. I don't know if you can get it on both of them, but you can get it on one. That worked out nicely, and I'm not strong. The only thing I need to do now tie this a little bit because you want to keep it shiny. And tie it up out of the way. And we'll use the $10,000 coilovers as a hook. So now that caliper's hanging out of the way, we gotta drop the car and get the brake pads out the other side. We'll get that caliper and rotor off, swap the rotors and put it right back together. So just a quick note, one thing that's been asked, and I think I never mentioned it in any of the videos, the hawk pads, you know, this little tab here, all it holds is the squealer on some street pads. So the backing plates automatically come with it. In the case of the hawk pads, it sticks out a little bit. When the pads are full thickness, it kind of makes it harder to get it down in the caliper because this pin tends to want to hit the piston. So just buzz them off on a grinder real quick if you think about it. It'll make your life a little easier and it'll save some confusion. So I just figured I'd show you that real quick while we were taking this apart. Thanks. So I just noticed another thing when I was taking this apart, because I keep seeing, I've got a couple different the OEM Brembo GM rotor hats. I mean, you'll notice right away, these particular ones have that protective metal thing. And this one is just on the aluminum. And you can of course see the witness marks where the little hold down springs were. I feel like they didn't ever change the bobbin width. They just changed the slot width to match the bobbin, whether it was with or without. Because it looks like the fit's relatively the same in either one. But this Camaro disc doesn't look like it has the protectors. I believe this is a Corvette hat and it does have the protectors. I've kind of seen it both ways. I don't know what really to make of it, much why GM is back and forth with it. But just something that I noted, and looks like the bobbins did stay the same. So that kind of makes sense because the aluminum is easier to machine, I guess. I don't know, they make these by the million. All right, so a couple other things I actually thought of since we started talking about the GM rotor hats. So C7 Z06 Corvette is a 2nd gen CTSV, which is the same as a 5th gen ZL1 brakes on the Camaro. And then this of course is the 6th gen SS1LE. All three of these rotors, or all three of these hats, excuse me, take the same rotor ring, 372 by 34 millimeters. But obviously there's some differences. First off, the Corvette is 12 millimeter, the Cadillac and the Camaro are 14 millimeter studs. And then, so that's the difference between, as you can see, the hat, you know, the hat mounting is the same. And, you know, trust me, it's the same. It's on there, so. Also, the 6th gen is 14 millimeter, but you can't use the 6th gen rotor on the 5th gen because offset. So, funny thing is, the ring's always the same, the hat is not, and there you go. And then, let's not even bring up the 6th Gen ZL1 because the rotor is bringing that on us. So, that's interesting if you're me. All right, so we went over some stuff. We get it put back together, put the rotor on the correct side, and off we go. So here's the hub. If you don't get every single bit of rust off that hub, I don't know, someone on the internet will get mad at you. So, yeah. Oh no, we don't have a bolt to hold that down. It's wiggly and we don't want to deal with that. So, take one of Cody's super fancy lug nuts, open-ended. And we can use that. Oh look, that stays right there. All right, let's get the caliper back on. I'm not going to lift the car up and use the gun here. I don't feel like it. About 125 ugga-duggas. All right, that was 3 times harder than it needed to be, but it's on there. Normally, you'd push the pistons back. Use your old brake pad that you use. You shove the pistons back. It's not rocket science. I use some combination of this, or this, and a brake pad, or this. Or you could buy the $250 thing from Girodisc. Brake pads look fine. Going back in, should drop in. Cross bolt goes in first. Remember which way it went? I forgot, so I'm just going to put it in. This is the way it went, I remember. Get her started. Let's get the other pin started at the same time. Catch. So if you push hard, you push the pad down. You can just catch the pin, then get the pad. You'll see, it's just kind of a wiggly thing. Once you get it into this part of the caliper, you're good. I keep forgetting to buy an appropriate tool, but you need to know that these detents are seated because there's no cotter pin or anything that directly or mechanically keeps the pin from backing out other than that old crimp thing they call it, whatever. So I use this. And you'll hear it change tone when it's seated as you're tapping. I don't know if you catch it on the video or not, but you'll definitely feel it when you're doing it. There. Definitely getting solid. Also, you may not be able to see it, but this is bigger than, the pin is small. And some of the Brembo calipers, the pin actually goes somewhat inside. So if your tool is not big enough to fit into the hole here, you won't get the pin seated. That, of course, is not good. In this case, that's not the case. You'll see it again. Pads are in. Everything looks good. Put the wheels back on. Remember, first pedal application or so is going to sink to the floor a little bit, get the thing seated. This is Canada's Brakes. Like and subscribe. Buy Hawk pads because they're good. And we're good with anything else.